promise maker is the promise keeper. Friends, this Sunday's readings center on two beloved sons of loving fathers. Isaac, child of the promise to Abraham and Sarah, and Jesus, the beloved son in whom the Father is well pleased. Isaac is a child of destiny, the one in whom rested Abraham's and Sarah's hopes of descendants who would be as many as the stars of the heaven and innumerable grains of sand. How can Abraham reconcile these bright promises of God with the dark command to sacrifice Isaac? Should Abraham be ready to jeopardize his own personal significance as the father of many nations by snuffing out the light and laughter of his life and lineage? And yet Abraham simply answers God with the prophetic, painful response, "Here I am. Here I am." He is ready to trust not in the promises made through Isaac, but in the promise maker himself, believing, as we all must, when an incomprehensible disaster or situation of despair takes place in our lives, occurs in our families, especially when we lose those who seem so necessary to our present and our future, that God has other ways of keeping His promises. I kept my faith even when I said, "I am greatly afflicted," we prayed in today's responsorial Psalm 116. God takes the risk that Abraham will be obedient to Him. And Abraham takes the risk that God will provide. Neither of them fail each other. My father, my son, are painful heartbeats of the climb that Abraham and his son Isaac takes upon themselves up Mount Moriah. Friends, we like the end of the story. The sacrifice stayed. The ram substituted for Isaac. Unless you're an animal lover, you'll have a different opinion, I know. We would much prefer to have just the salvation and blessing part without the testing, without the challenge. That's not God's ways. They were not at the start of the world and creation. They're not now either. Let's look at the gospel. Mark recounts the climb of another son up the mount where he is transfigured. It's been 6 days after Jesus' first prediction of his passion, followed by Peter's uncomprehending response, and Jesus' attempt to teach the disciples that true discipleship will mean suffering and dying, out of which new life will be born. Suffering and dying, out of which new life will be born. So, God provides a fleeting and encouraging glimpse of the outcome of Jesus' life and death in this transfiguration. Jesus takes 3 apostles, right? Peter, James, and John up the mountain, a place of privileged biblical revelation, to be alone with Him and to attempt to give them some insight into the depths of the mystery veiled by Jesus' humanity. There are the 3 disciples who will also go along with Him in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus will sweat blood and say, "Father, if it is possible, take this cup of suffering away from me, yet not my will, your will be done." Putting God's plan, God's will, God's ways first. The cloud of divine presence tents over the disciples. While Peter thinks, "Let's build 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah," not knowing what to respond, out of fear, feeling protected up on that mountain. God has different plans. And in it, the voice of the Father affirms that this is my Son, my beloved, listen to him. We are called to obedience to this voice of God. As they come down the mountain, the disciples are still confused. And so Jesus tells them not to tell anybody what happened up on the mountain, what they have experienced, until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. It is obvious, friends, that they had not understood what had happened up on the mountain, and so their telling would both be confusing and confused statements. The transfiguration is only a preview of the glory of Jesus, to which he must go by the way of passion, death, and then be raised up by the Father's glory. To announce Jesus' glory without the cross would be both premature and theologically inadequate. Friends, in 1516, Raphael painted an extraordinary work now in the Vatican Gallery, which is simply called Transfiguration. The upper section of the painting is Jesus' transfiguration on the mountain. The below is the healing of the epileptic boy. With his artistic and spiritual insight, Raphael, like the gospel writers, recognized both events as transfiguration. Both are related. Baptized into the transfigured one, we too, friends, are called to lead transfiguring lives for the sake of our brothers and sisters, especially those who are suffering on the plane of everyday life and encounters. It is to such a plane that Jesus and his disciples descend immediately after the gospel of transfiguration to the healing of the epileptic boy. The promise maker is the promise keeper. Paul, in the second reading, says simply and yet with profound and unshakable faith that if God is for us, if God is with us, no one, nothing at all can be against us. That's again, the promise maker is the promise keeper. That again is the covenant. That again is the command that God is remaining faithful to us as our God and we his people, his children, his sons and daughters. In our doubting or puzzlement over what rising from the dead might mean, we need the faith of Abraham. We need the faith of Paul. We need the faith of Jesus himself. Our future may be surprising, will certainly involve suffering, but with profound trust in God, who is for us, nothing in the end will be against us, because the promise maker is the promise keeper. This is the Easter faith. This is the Easter hope that we are marching toward in this Lenten journey through fasting, prayer, almsgiving. This faith and hope that sustains us and urges us to travel, even amidst the trials and difficulties and challenges and moments of despair we face every day in our lives. God wants us to give us hope. Hope right now, right today. What killed Jesus is what continues to crucify today. Disregard for human life, human dignity, selfishness, lust for power, materialism, violence, bringing division. What gives life is faith and love. What gives life is faith and love. And if I might add, the sacrificial love. God wanted to know if he was the first in Abraham's life. God still wants to know if that is true about us. Friends, are you in some state of despair today? What is your journey like today? Maybe you know someone or some family who feels hopeless due to mental illness, due to addiction, due to loss of loved ones, due to terminal illness, or due to the uncertainty ahead of them, whether health, family, job, or any situation, or maybe due to abuse that has occurred in family life. The promise maker is the promise keeper. We have said yes to this promise in our baptism. We too are promise makers. We too are called to keep our promise. Friends, today come to Him. Bring those people's lives to Jesus as we offer the sacrifice of the Mass. In Jesus, there is no hopelessness. Hope does not disappoint those who trust in God. He will transfigure our lives. Come to Him and experience His transfiguration. Bring to Him those people, and may they experience the hope of the